10 questions every atheist must answer, huh? More like 10 bits of bullshit spouted by a theist. But let's do this. So I found a video. It's actually a very old video from like 2007, but it's asking 10 questions that apparently every atheist must answer. Actually, it's a steaming load of bullshit pulled out of someone's ass, but let's give it a go anyway. Question number 1.
If there is no God, why is there anything at all?
Are you serious? Because what we have here is a big old God of the gaps argument, a big old God wins by default argument, which he doesn't. See, I don't know why there's something rather than nothing. I don't know why we have anything at all. But I'm willing to search and find out. I'm not willing to just make crap up. And that's what God is. I mean, unless you can prove to me that God is real, God doesn't get to win this argument by default. So I'm sorry, but this question is just utterly meaningless. On to question number 2.
Where is the evidence that life could have begun without intelligent interference?
Well, right back at you, pal. I mean, where's the evidence that says that life requires intelligent intervention? Once again, you're trying for a God wins by default argument, and it doesn't work like that. You'll have to prove that life was built instead of just happened to come together. It's up to you, too. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, all life truly is matter behaving in a certain way. Certain bits of matter came together at some point and ended up working together for mutual benefit. Not in any kind of mindful way, they just seemed to mesh, and it built and built on it until finally life became complicated enough to be self-aware. That's all life really is matter behaving in a certain way. So again, this question, pretty damn meaningless, and trying for the God wins by default. Not gonna happen. No God of the gaps here. On to question 3.
How can evolution explain features of irreducible complexity apart from intelligent intervention?
What features of irreducible complexity? I don't see any. I think it's actually up to you to prove that there is irreducible complexity. Be specific and show how it happened. I mean, once again, you're trying for God of the gaps. You're trying for God wins by default. If I can't answer the question of irreducible complexity, well, then I guess God did it, huh? It doesn't work like that, pal. You're going to have to prove your side, too. Even if my side turns out to be wrong, that doesn't mean yours is right. It may be a third option that neither one of us has thought up. But you're not thinking about that, are you? You're just thinking God gets to win if I can't answer the question? Not going to happen. Now, on to question 4.
How can the evolutionary model be true, since the fossil record clearly shows most major groups emerging at the same time?
It doesn't. On to question 5.
If there is no objective standard of right or wrong, how can anything be wrong?
Well, that's simple. Right and wrong don't exist. Not in the sense you mean. Not in terms of some absolute standard where we have these rules that always have to be followed under every circumstance, no matter what. That's simply non-existent. What we actually have is the intersection of with and without permission versus hurts and doesn't hurt. That's what we've actually got. You see, if something hurts somebody and they don't like it, and they haven't given you permission, that's what we call wrong. But there isn't some objective standard against which to measure. I mean, the fact is we're all improvising. And while that may suck, get over it. That's life. On to question 6.
So which is the logically defensible position? That matter eternally existed or came into existence by itself for no reason, and then by itself arranged itself into extraordinarily complex living systems, including not only mechanisms but huge amounts of information needed for life to function against everything observed in real science? Or that an eternal self-existing being with infinite intelligence created life and the information systems necessary for life to exist, agreeing with real science?
Let's just for a moment forget the part where this is complete and utter bullshit, where it's utterly misrepresenting what science says and what's true and what isn't. Let's forget that just for a moment. The fact is, it's irrelevant. Completely irrelevant. The question is not which is more reasonable. The question is which actually is so. The question is which do we have evidence for. The question is which can we prove. That has nothing to do with which is more reasonable. Even if the facts were completely unreasonable, if that's what they showed, then that's what's the case. On to question 7.
How can natural selection produce something that is a prerequisite for natural selection to operate?
Well, it can't. It also doesn't. So that kind of works out. This question betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of what natural selection even does. All it really says is that those creatures with the traits that allow them to survive the best will survive and reproduce. That's all it says. So the only thing that natural selection requires is that something be alive at all. On to question 8.
If scientists almost totally accept that a signal from outer space containing information that could be interpreted as a string of prime numbers would be proof of extraterrestrial intelligence, why would they not accept that the information coding in the nucleus of the simplest cell's DNA, which is equivalent to the information in a full set of Encyclopedia Britannica, was the result of intelligence?
If we're getting signals from outer space, well, that kind of indicates that there's an intelligence behind it. Someone did that on purpose. It requires technology. But even regardless of that, the fact is that prime numbers are not going to be broadcast to us in any way. You know, if we're getting prime numbers from somewhere, it has to be on purpose. But if you look at the information that's in a cell, all that's there for is to help the cell live and grow. That's it. It's not an attempt at communication. You see, sending prime numbers to somebody is a way of saying, hey, here's information you wouldn't get otherwise. Here's information that, sure, it's true, but unless you went looking for it, you're not going to find it unless it's being sent to you by an intelligence. Therein lies the difference. On to question 9.
What if God is real as described in the Bible and you have to stand before Him and give an account for your life? Do you have a list of reasons for why you never accepted Him? Under close scrutiny, will those reasons betray the fact that you don't want to believe and will stick with anything that sounds good rather than look into it too seriously?
Oh, quite the opposite. I've looked into it thoroughly. The fact is, your God ain't there. And if He is, He's hiding Himself. Now, if your God can't respect my integrity for refusing to believe in something for which I have no evidence, then I'm sorry, but your God is an asshole. And demanding faith of us instead of giving us facts and telling us that we have to believe for no good reason, that we have to be gullible, okay, that's the behavior of a con man and not a good guy. So if that's who your God is and if that's what He expects of us, then your God's a dick. And I will be happy to tell Him that. Last question, question 10.
If I answered all your objections to your satisfaction, would you submit your life to Jesus or recognize God as your creator?
Short answer, no. Long answer, fuck no. You see, here's the problem. If your God is real, and your God is the one described in the Bible, that God's a dick. That God's the bad guy. He expects things of us and demands things of us that, frankly, I object to. I would oppose that God. I would rebel against that God. But more than that, I mean, suppose God really is my creator, okay? So what? Do you still obey your parents? I mean, I'm a legal adult. I don't have to obey my parents. And if they ask me to do things I object to, I'll tell them to get fucked. And it's the same way with God. Why should you obey someone just because they happen to be your creator? That doesn't make any sense at all. So, if your God is a complete dick, I'm not joining him. I'm just not on his side. That's all there is to it. So, even if your God was real, you still have all your work ahead of me to get me to be one of you. Anyway, this is BionicDance. I'll catch you later. I'd rather be an atheist smartass than a religious dumbass.